weekly notification of who the special weekly guest will be at thecaseyingramshow.com. Again, that's thecaseyingramshow.com, and I'll let you know who the special in-studio guest will be for the week. Calling all nights. If you are a Pine School or St. Michael Knight alumni from any class, from any time of attendance of kindergarten through 12, we are looking for you. Or if you are aware of any Knight alumni, please let us know. The evening of celebration on November 7, 2020 will feature many of our former Knights. This will be a great opportunity to showcase our alumni as they shift from the Pine School to excellent universities and colleges and then shift on to great careers. Please email Beth Lettengarver at alumni@thepineschool.org with contact information. Save the date, 11/7/2020. More exciting details to come. So in the studio this evening, we have a special KW. We'd like to find out a little bit more about you. You have explained about Congressional District 18. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started this committee.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Casey. Essentially, I grew up in South Florida. I guess as a background, I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida, back in the late 70s, early 80s, and went off and built my career, but still, maintained my Florida residence, and have anecdotally been following all of the growth over the last 30 years, and at some point in time, you kind of make a decision to kind of try to reinvest in your community and reinvest where you come from. So at this point, I started to look at what was happening in my backyard, outside of, being, a visitor, in my own backyard. I wanted to be more active, as they say. And so we looked at the 18th district, and we looked at the 2020 elections coming up, and we really found that there was a cry out for change from the district voters. And, we were asked to form a committee, rather than just run right into something. So essentially, that's what the K.W. Miller Congressional Committee is nothing more than a true exploratory committee to understand what the voters of the district want, what their concerns are, which we're going to talk about today, obviously.
Yes.
And really spending time with the people on the ground.
So how long has the committee been in formation?
I believe we put it together sometime toward the end of November of 2019.
Okay.
It was in loose form, but we formalized it in that territory of time. And then from there on, we've been very active in the community in various forms, listening. And so my main job is to listen right now.
So how are you going about, and what are you listening for when you're out there? Let's talk a little bit about, you've visited some different groups.
Yes.
And
yes.
What are you hearing?
Well, I mean, obviously we wanted to hit or get the main points from the community as to what are their main issues. And I think really boils down to, as we can see, 4 to 5 that are really driving, we'll call it the Florida 18th Congressional District. Clearly, there is very deep concern about the gray matter items surrounding the water quality, okay, and how that really reflects into a broader strategy. So it's not just Stewart, it's not just Jensen Beach, it's not any of the area coastal areas. It's a comprehensive problem. So that's one issue that comes up all the time in discussion. The second is really the Constitution. And people are, clearly upset along a lot of lines that they feel like the Constitution is kind of being run over. And we can talk about that as well. And
right.
So they're very concerned about that. Healthcare is another.
Yes.
There's a lot of concern about healthcare and the gaps in the system, which we can of course discuss. Meaning transitioning from an Obamacare model to we'll call it a commercial model,
right.
for lack of better terms. And then, obviously we've got a bigger issue that we're starting to identify, which is, you've heard a lot about opioids and opioid addiction. What we're starting to see is a real problem with the elderly and the military veterans being, kind of left out in the cold on pain management. And that's something that's really near and dear to me because, I've gone through some traumatic experiences, medically in my life. And I understand what that means. I've actually had to be on those heavy pain meds for a period of time. I don't take any, thing like that heavily anymore. But I understand when you have that need, and if you don't have that care, it's a real problem. So something along those lines we want to talk about as well.
That's a really big issue, and you bring that up. There's a lot of issues here I want to delve into much deeper, but the opioid crisis is a big one out there, and we've done some shows on that, and we've lost some young souls as well. And
yes.
You had some statistics on the veterans that's absolutely astounding.
Yes.
For example, I think you said that there are more that are dying from suicide than what we lost in the Vietnam War.
All right. So from 2008 till today, we've lost more veterans from suicide than we did in the entire Vietnam War. We lost about 58,000 people in the Vietnam War, and we've lost well over that due to suicide.
It's certainly a very big issue that needs to be addressed.
It is.
I want to go back here. In this district, CD 18, I would say the water issue is our largest issue of concern. It's not only the discharges and pollution in the water, but it's a health and safety concern for the residents here.
It is.
So you have really delved in, and I'm going to share, you have a website, Florida18thdistrict.com. You've written a lot of blogs, and I encourage folks to go to your website, read a lot of your blogs, because it is very clear to me that you have a great understanding of our water issues.
Well, I'm an infrastructure man, so that's something that we can talk more about that as well. But I spent a lot of time in my career in the infrastructure business.
Tell us a little bit more. How do you see the water issues being solved?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll use that keyword again, infrastructure. We'll talk about it a lot. I'd say the number one problem Florida has in general right now, outside of the 18th district, which also includes the 18th district, is infrastructure. We have a lack of infrastructure. We're overdeveloped and overdeveloped from a standpoint of human beings, and we're underdeveloped from a standpoint of supporting that lifestyle, if you want to call it that. And clearly, our sewage and water infrastructure is massively, massively behind schedule.
So I have a question here that just
Sure.
came in, and that was if you were to be an elected official, would you vote out sugar subsidies?
Well, sugar subsidies are a red herring. And let me give you an example. If I took you and any other voter from the 18th district on a road trip and we looked at corn subsidies and ethanol subsidies, it would outweigh sugar subsidies. Sugar subsidies are there. But the problem with taking sugar subsidies away from the Florida agriculture market is we would have to have a universal program to take it away from everybody, because you just can't, you can't just do one and not the other. So if we're going to have an agricultural market that is, totally market driven, then we probably should take it away from corn and from the wheat farmers and everybody else, soybean farmers, because it would be unfair to the Florida economy, not so much the farmers themselves, to the economy, because we have $104 billion a year agricultural economy in Florida, which is massive, and it really does, with tourism, keep us alive.
And KW, you're absolutely right. You had mentioned too, there's more than 2.1 million jobs in that agricultural industry here in Florida. So very big industry indeed. Let's talk a little bit more. You're a Republican,
okay.
And your committee is finding out they're not satisfied with Congressman Mast and what he has been doing with the water issues. I was going to say however you want to say it, but
right.
What do you see if you were to be elected or from your committee? Mm-hmm. What can we do different? And one thing I agree with you is we need infrastructure, which means money.
We do, yes.
But the one thing I have to say is our representatives, they're 1 out of 435, right?
Yes, yes.
So how do we bring the money here to Florida?
Yeah, well, okay. So, I mean, we could slice this onion a couple different ways. First and foremost, a federal congressman's job is not to basically delve, in my professional opinion, into the backyard of what I'll call state and local officials' jobs, and also, lifetime engineers and consultants who fundamentally know their business. Now, look, are there bad actors in every industry? Of course. So can there be? Yes, but that fundamentally is not the biggest issue here at hand. The fact that when you're dealing with the water quality issues and the infrastructure issues, you have to basically focus on what you really need, what we really large dollars. Okay. Then once those dollars are in the box, then you basically go into the allocation phase. Once the allocation phase gets enacted, then you're talking about, okay, where are we going to put that money to work? So it's not a special interest model, which is unfortunately where we've gone to now. One of the biggest problems we have now is unfortunately Brian Mast has got himself in the box and he can't get out. He's in the special interest box, and he's stuck. And frankly, nobody can get him out. He can't get himself out. And that's the problem. So when you focus on one project, for example, the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir, that's all you talk about 24/7, and you talk about the lake levels. Well, first of all, I've been in the business 30 years. I wouldn't even go out publicly tell you what I think the lake levels should be, because I fundamentally would have to use so many scientific pieces of the puzzle, along with about 50 other people, that it's not my job. It's not in my wheelhouse. Now, would I expect others to weigh in? Absolutely. And would I expect them to advise me? Absolutely. But you wouldn't see me holding a town hall meeting saying we need the lake to be at a certain level. That's just not what a congressman does. It's not what a federal official does. How do you get through the 400 plus? You get through that by business as long as I have and understanding how to navigate those waters. So infrastructure allocation is a multi-billion-dollar business. Okay. And that's what we have to be doing in DC, particular district. But also you have to work with the other congressional leaders in the area because you need them on board. It's not just one person. Okay, this is not the KW Miller show, or it's not the XYZ show. It's how do we make this better for Florida? And then we get those folks together, and then we basically lobby as a group for the issues that matter, and the issues are dollars, and we need those dollars allocated, not unallocated, allocated. That's the key.
We absolutely do need to have them allocated. And speaking more on the water issues, something else that you focused on was finding upstream sewage containment to mitigate flows south into the waterways.
Yes.
This is hugely important. Can you share a little bit of information about that?
Well, fundamentally, that's where we get into the situation where overdevelopment has, outpaced infrastructure development. And it's just, you could look at it like a bar chart, right? Increased people coming to Florida, increased development. Not in my backyard mentality, meaning I don't want, a sewer line running down my main road. I don't want a water line. I don't want to pay a sewer tap. I don't want to pay a water tap. I don't want to pay any surcharges. Okay. I just want to pay my electric bill, and I don't even want to pay that. You get my right. So that's the model. And the problem is that's been good for local politics for a long time. So the local politicians fundamentally went along with that. Well, 30, 40, 50 years later, guess what? You're in the box, okay, because you've got a monumentally large density problem with the sewage, okay, and the sewage disposal. Now, if you're on a 20-acre tract of land and you have a septic system, it can digest that system. If you're on a quarter acre or a half acre and you've got a septic system and you got 5,000 of those in a dense corridor, you've got a problem.
That's right.
So we're going to have to basically come up with the money, and that's called infrastructure finance. And whether it's a bond or a series of bonds, or it's a combination of bonds, grants, sewer tap fees, water tap fees, it has to get done because we can't go on the way we're going.
I'm going to take a very short break here. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about what your exploratory committee is finding. I know that you've done some studies, the election, how it'll turn out, the Democrats, Republicans in the area. So let's talk about that right after this short announcement. Stewart Downtown Auction, real auctions, real results. Personal property estate items being sold by public live auction, which includes furniture, designer decor, paintings, crystal, area rugs, TVs, and appliances. It's happening on March 21st at 10 a.m. with a preview at 9 a.m. at our location at 712 Southeast Dixie Highway in Stewart. Live competitive bidding establishes the price. Love auctions? So do we. Auctions are a great way to get a good deal and see items that you never knew you even wanted. Come explore our inventory of estate items and bid on your treasure and leave with a fun memory. Have items laying around, taking up space that you just do not want anymore? We have a solution. Call the Stewart Downtown Auction to have your items picked up and sold at auction, and the proceeds can go to you or to any of the local charities that you choose. We have the bidders that want to buy your items. When you are serious about selling, so are we. Associate Auctions and Stewart Downtown Auction provide a complete solution to real estate and personal property assets throughout the Treasure Coast. Associate Auctions in Stewart Downtown, located at 712 Southeast Dixie Highway. Contact Casey Daniel, auctioneer, at 772-291-2806. That's 291-2806. Okay, KW. So now we're back. That's our quick break here to support our local auction. So we wanted to talk a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more. Your exploratory committee has been out there. You're saying this is why we need to look at other candidates in CD 18 on the Republican ticket. What are you finding?
Well, okay, so a couple things. We won't get into too much, but just a quick snapshot. If you look back at 2018, essentially leaving the current incumbent out, the margin of victory was relatively slim. Okay, when you factor into the fact that you've had probably some, we think some fraudulent ballots in the St. Lucie County area, and leave that aside, basically the margin on a weak Democratic candidate was fairly small. So we take the assumption after both polling this district for about 60 days heavily that margin of victory in any Republican candidate is gone. Okay, and probably going negative. So, especially with St. Lucie County being, relatively speaking, a purple county.
Right.
So, with that being said, you've got a problem right there. Okay, you have a demographic problem. The second problem is then if you look at the current incumbent, who is borderline, liberal candidate, by virtue of what his voting record is. It's just factual voting record. This is not a personality dispute, right? It's just what you've done in Congress during your time. Then basically, polling indicates that incumbent would lose a general election. okay, without intervention. And that's fundamentally another issue. And we have redistricting coming up in a couple of years as well. So we're looking at two pieces of the puzzle. One is the 2020 election. Okay, how do we address what needs to be done there? But we're also looking at how do we protect this region from a conservative base, and those are the two issues driving what we're doing right now in the committee.
I have some questions here from some listeners. What are you going to do about the northern estuaries, St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers? How would you alleviate discharges, and at what level would you recommend Lake Okeechobee, which you already addressed already, that you're going to go to the people in the know, the officials?
I'd actually rather focus on science rather than political science. Let's be clear.
Right. Yeah. So you would go to them. And then also, have you accepted any money from? If you have, would you return it?
I have not.
I think the ACO would be in control of our state's water management, or should be water management. How can we fund it with federal strings?
Yeah, I think it has to be a consortium control. We're never going to get into either a federal, strictly private, or strictly state. It's going to be a consortium. Everybody's a stakeholder.
One last question, different topic. I am a nurse. Many nurses face retaliation and harassment when speaking up regarding safety issues in Florida's hospitals and nursing homes. How would you address this issue? We are not a union-friendly state, and we are finding many legislators are being lobbied by big dollar healthcare.
Remember, the elderly, whether it be a veteran or just a general citizen, they're at risk. They're high risk, and the caretakers are the first line of defense. And it comes when it's dealing with opioids or others, and they have to be protected. So, to the extent that there is, discrimination in any form, whether it be employment or harassment from outside forces, has to be addressed. I mean, we'd have to look at it specifically and understand what's happening. But clearly, those caretakers have to be protected.
Certainly, I don't want to skip around this issue as well. If you go to your website, you are clearly a very strong conservative.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the Second Amendment rights, and that was certainly one of the issues that was pointed out with Congressman Mast because of the AR-15s. They want to. It's not an assault rifle. It's it's a semi-automatic.
It's a long gun.
Yes.
For lack of better terms, it's a long gun.
So, obviously he has advocated to have some restrictions on the Second Amendment. Where does your committee find that people stand with that?
Okay, well, first of all, our committee finds a lot. The veteran community is very vocal, as you can imagine, and they feel betrayed, simply put. And again, this is them, not me speaking. This is me. I'm just kind of funneling, kind of a synopsis. They feel like he lied to them openly, in his pre-election activities in 15, 16, that he's continued to lie to them. That's them. And then secondly, they feel that he is openly violating the Constitution, pure and simple. Okay, on multiple fronts. So that's the veteran community. The sportsmen, watermen, and general, constitutionalists feel the same way. The veterans feel a little bit more slighted because he was so in their face, as a veteran himself. And so they took that as a personal front. The rest of the community just feels like he's just not on the same page as them. Okay, fundamentally. And there's an old saying in business, and it's very simple. When you're explaining, you're losing. And either you're constitutionalist or you're not. There's no if, and, or buts. That's the bottom line.
So one other question, follow that up. With the shootings that we've had in the schools, how do you look at solving that issue? I mean, that's the one thing is you want your children to go to school and be safe.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't have to worry about it otherwise.
Well, look, I mean, the school boards are, look, I have a lot of problems with the way school boards are run. We can talk about that, but again, I'm not
another big issue.
Right. So we'll get off on a tangent, but I'll just say this. There's a lot that can be done at the local school board level, okay, when it comes down to security and other matters that are common sense solutions to create, scenarios where the likelihood of those shootings happening are very, very limited.
So KW, we've talked a little bit about the Second Amendment. We've certainly talked about our water issues here. You had touched earlier on healthcare.
Yes.
Improving healthcare so that there is access for everybody, but somebody also has to pay for it if
that's right.
It's offered to all.
Well, okay, so two things, and I'll be very vocal on this one, as we go forward too. If you're a paid-in senior, okay, you have earned the right to some support system. If you're a time-served veteran, you have a right to medical, which is the VA care system.
Yes.
So whether you're a civilian or a retired military, eligible military, because not everybody's eligible, you have a right to basic care. Okay, so they're paid in. Now the problem that we get into is, we have so many not paid in coming into the system that it's starting to overwhelm our system, and therein lies, the Bernie Sanders model, which is, every man a king. Every man cannot be a king. so to speak, that
Right.
theory. Every man cannot be a king. That goes back to Huey Long in the Louisiana politics days. There has to be somebody who puts the money into the box. So if you work 30 years and you retire, you're entitled. Now, there's going to have to be some negotiating on the Hill with both the Democrats and the Republicans on pre-existing conditions, and the price caps. Because clearly those are the two toggles that are exposed right now.
Mhm.
And so we can't just rip, the problem the Republicans have, if we rip away the Obamacare model and we just say that we're going to basically put pre-existing conditions in protection, what does that mean? And so my mission is to define that, or to be a part of the solution to define that. And that's not defined yet, but we have to focus on it.
We certainly do.
Yeah.
Another question here from Facebook. I'd like to know how you arrive at 2.2 million ag jobs. Please give us a breakdown.
That's a statistic from the state. Those are statistics from the state statisticians.
A super simple answer.
That's right.
Very good. So with your exploratory committee, I've got to ask you this, KW. So when will you decide if you are going to file for this seat?
Right. So the deadline is in mid-April, give or take a day or two. And, there's no rush. I mean, we're, at this point, we feel very comfortable that we're plugged into the community. Every day we get more plugged in, and it's not just me, and it's not just a small circle. Every day the circle grows. So, before mid-April.
Before mid-April, we're going to find out.
Yeah.
And if people want to find out more about you, again, Florida18thdistrict.com is your website. And if you go to Facebook, just type in KW Miller Congressional Exploratory Committee, and your Facebook page will pop right up as well.
It will.
And accessible through the website or the Facebook page. So, what else have you found out in this district? We've covered some really hot topics here as far as the healthcare Second Amendment rights and, of course, the water issues. What else have you found in this district that is a hot topic that people do not believe is being addressed right now?
Well, I mean, there's just one thing that continues to come to the surface, which is, and it's not something that just happened in the last 2 years or 3 years. It's been an ongoing problem. It's evolved over time, which is the evolution of the special interest and how that tangles with what we call dark money now. So essentially, what we're seeing is more and more, we'll call it nonprofit special interests, PAC money.
Right.
It's what we call blind pool money, right, where you can't track the donors.
Mhm.
But I mean, let's put it this way: we know who the donors are.
Mhm.
We don't need specific names. We know the genre, and how that is the biggest issue that we're seeing in the community is how that's affecting what's really happening as far as blocking progress, blocking addressing the real issues. For example, the water. Okay,
Mhm.
The water is fundamentally dominated by special interests now. Okay, and it's not the sugar industry. The sugar industry has lobbyists because they have to protect their interests, but so do the agricultural processors, so do the ranchers, so do all of the other farmers. They have because if they don't protect their interests, they will be out of business. So that's the biggest issue we're seeing is people are very, very just downtrodden and really upset that they feel like their whole lifestyle has been hijacked by people who don't even live in the district.
Another question here from Facebook. Do you support E-Verify for all employers?
I do.
You do?
I do.
That's another simple question.
Yes.
Very good. So other than that, we've covered a lot of these topics, as I've said. Tell us a little bit about you, KW. So you have a financial background.
Financial and operations, yes. I'm a combination. So I went to school in DC Catholic University, have an MBA from the University of North Carolina, the Keenan Flagler Business School. I'm portfolio management trained by the Chase Manhattan Bank. I spent the better part of 30 years both in the U.S. Working on big, large energy and infrastructure projects, as well as in Europe, Asia, and most recently in the African continent. And so what I am is nothing. Probably simplistically an energy and infrastructure expert. But most importantly, out of that, the first thing that we always look at when we look at these projects is water. And so water is not foreign to me. Water is something that I understand. And I understand the Corps of Engineers. I understand the Department of Water Quality. And I understand all these regulatory agencies. And I'll leave you with this on that point. When you talk to people, not at them, you get better results. And that's one of the problems that we're having right now is that people feel like the current incumbent is just making a lot of noise, talking at people, writing letters, Instagrams, emails, and people have just tuned him out. The regulatory authorities, well, I can tell you they've tuned him out.
Another comment here off Facebook, our estuary is out of business. You were talking about infrastructure.
Yes.
Water is one of the first things that you
Yes.
look at. Water is the number one issue for the seat. No one else in the state will fight for our estuary. To take a back seat on this issue is insane.
Yes, I agree. No, it has to. I mean, look, the agricultural industry and the tourism industry are driven by water. So it would be insane for us not to address that. But not to address it, like I said, by screaming and yelling and talking at people, by actually dealing with the problem. And let me put it this way. If you ask me today as a citizen, I would say we need adult supervision in the room. Why am I here? Because I believe I can bring that adult supervision, especially in DC, to get to your point initially, which is how do you get all this money in here
Right.
and 430 plus candidates in your way? They're not in your way, really. Everybody has, is going to get a piece of the budget. You have to basically articulate and be savvy in dealing with the regulatory agencies and the halls. And that's what I've done for my entire career.
So you have a lot of experience in that area. And that is one of the frustrating things. We've been fighting this water battle for so long, and it's just trying to get our voices heard down here in Florida when everybody has an issue in their district.
Well, but you can't bring the Corps of Engineers and all of the special interest activities together and attack one focal point, because you're gonna lose every day of the week, because they're not gonna bend.
Well, KW Miller, it has been a wonderful and quick half hour here speaking with you today. Again, I strongly suggest folks go to his website. There's so many blogs and very well written blogs. You really understand a lot of different issues. We only covered a few, probably the hottest topics here for this district today.
Absolutely.
And but your blogs go in depth of your understanding and your solutions.
Yeah, well, we go very deep. Can I just say one thing? We have also a Facebook page called Florida 18th District Water and Environment. And that's really specifically for people to focus on the water issues. And so we'll be populating that as we go forward.
Fantastic. We're out of time today, but KW Miller, Florida18thdistrict.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.